a mecca of madness and morbidity. Your work begins.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Bedomy and this is Darkest Dungeon, a 2D dungeon crawler with elements of human resource management, which is basically a job simulation game, where you're the manager and you have to manage your employees. It will make sense later on, trust me. For now, let's just focus on entering a dungeon and completing a mission. As you can see, I already have a mission selected. Well, the game selected the mission for me and I have to complete the mission in order to get some rewards, which is a trinket and some amount of currency. And they're ours if we explore 90% of the rooms. Not a bad trade-off, if you ask me. So let's set up our party and get ready to depart. I already have 2 experienced adventurers, but I'm not going to take them on this mission. We don't have any healers, so I'm not going to risk my most experienced man in a mission that could kill him. Instead, we will send in a more inexperienced team to bring us the riches, gain some experience, and or die trying. Whichever comes first. And while we're on the subject of first, I think we'll go with the Hellion in the front. After that we'll go with Guts, and in the 3rd place we'll take the Samurai. So that leaves the 4th place undecided. To be honest, I am torn between the Highwayman and the Bounty Hunter. They both have a very decent set of skills when it comes to melee and ranged combat, but the Bounty Hunter has a shuffle ability, which I want to see in practice. So I think we'll put him in and see how it goes. But before we go anywhere, I'll check what my abilities are and formulate a strategy. I don't want to have a meet the Goblin Slayer moment in the middle of a raid. And for those of you wondering, Goblin Slayer shouldn't be viewed if you're a faint of heart. Granted, he would make a very good character in this game, but that's not the point. The point is, if you can't find this game appealing, you won't find Goblin Slayer appealing either. But then again, you're watching this, so you're probably into that. So yeah, I recommend the anime and the book series. They're very good. And so are the abilities of a samurai. He can move around the battlefield with relative ease and cause bleeding to his enemies while also buffing himself up. But he has a rather low resistance to anything else and no protection to speak of, so he will have to rely on his agility to survive. Something similar could be said about our Hellion. Smog can dish out the damage, but he cannot take it. He has some abilities that can prevent him from taking damage, but I would be happier if he had a little more in the way of protection. And while the Battlecry can stun opponents in front of him, it's not the most reliable of abilities. This is mostly due to the fact that the enemies have their own strengths and resistances, and some of them are very resistant to stun, but if that happens we can still bleed them out.
The cost of preparedness, measured now in gold, later in blood.
There, you see? Even my ancestor agrees. Now let's get ready for our trip. We'll need provisions, food, torches, and maybe a shovel or 2. We are entering old ruins, so I'm guessing there will be some rubble to clear up. And it seems that our friends from Manor Londo brought their own equipment with them, which is good because we don't have to waste money on extra equipment. Now I'm not certain what the Bewitched Blade can do to the Samurai apart from bleeding and stressing him out. I'm guessing it will increase his stats for a while and cause extra damage and bleeding. But that's just a wild guess. We also got an orange tincture which will regenerate our health. Basically I used this flask, so let's move on. I think it would be wise to take some bandages and medicine just in case. But for now let's just take some food and torches. Actually, you guys can go ahead to the ruins without me. I'm just going to stay here a bit to read about the items. I'll tell you what they do when the time comes. But for now I'm not going to waste too much of your time. Hey guys, sorry for the wait. It took some time to get everything we need, but we have supplies we need and we can enter the ruins that resemble the Notre Dame. This isn't going to end well, unless we find some historical relics we can save. But as far as I'm aware, most of these relics were evacuated before the fire. So for now we'll just concentrate on exploration. We have to explore 90% of the area, which means we have to search 468 times 09, that's 7 rooms. But before we go, I want to take the moment to plan out our route. As people on Reddit told me, backtracking causes stress, so I want to avoid it as much as possible. Since this is our first dungeon, we don't have much of a choice when it comes to crossroads. So our best bet is to just go towards the crossroads and make a choice there. If there are any clues that will guide us towards safety or treasure, we'll follow them. Otherwise, we'll play this by ear. So let us embark on this epic quest of discovery, terror, and treasure. And the first thing we find is a torch. I should stop playing this right now, shouldn't I? You know what? No. Let's move on. Let's make a story out of this. We are a party that's investigating the burning of Notre Dame in an alternate universe. Upon finding the torch, Investigator Froman came to one conclusion. This fire was no accident. It is the vile work of heretics, conspirators, and traitors. God, the dead are rising from the grave. Men, ready your weapons! We have monsters to slay. And with those fighting words, the investigator launched himself towards the undead horrors that were running towards him. Only to realize he was not fighting creatures of flesh and blood, but creatures of dark and forbidden arts. And he only had moments to curse the idiot who sent him into this foul place. Hey, how was I supposed to know there were skeletons in here? Maybe because your ancestor wrote to you about this. I thought the guy was demented! Look, let's just get rid of the skeletons first, and then we can discuss this, okay? Agreed. Alright, since there's only 2 of them, we can try to use the battle shout and stun them. If it works, we can lay in the damage and finish them within the turn. And lo and behold, it works! Now we just have to carefully choose our abilities... Oh, right, he can only use the bomb. Pity. I thought I could use the hook as well. But it seems we'll have to rely on the flashbang for now. Which in hindsight isn't so bad. It can stun an opponent and shuffle him within the party. So at the very least we can disrupt enemies from using their more deadly abilities. And while we're on the subject of deadly abilities, the samurai would spell death for these guys if they were bandits. Or anything made out of flesh and blood. If he ever manages to hit it, that is. And now it's all up to Guts. Using the crossbow on one skeleton would be wasteful, so I think it's best to reveal the brand of sacrifice and see what happens in the next turn. The brand will draw enemies towards Guts, but it will heal him up and allow him to use riposte. The next turn comes, and the samurai gets the chance to redeem himself. Now we just have to be careful about which ability to use. We barely started the mission, and I would like to keep at least 2 of my soldiers healthy. So if the party gets shuffled, I don't have to worry about losing men immediately.
Back to the pit.
Alright, we have a corpse, which acts as a temporary obstacle and has to be removed. We can destroy it, pull it closer or push it away, but as long as it interrupts the enemy movement and attacks, it should be fine. Wait a minute. How can a skeleton leave a corpse? Really? You want to discuss this in the middle of a fight? Well, no, but impunity. It is somewhat surprising, you have to admit. The Honorable Bounty Hunter is right. It is somewhat surprising.
True. They do have a point, you know.
I am not questioning anyone's logic. I am questioning the Bounty Hunter's sense of timing.
Yeah, fair enough. It was distracting.
Thank you. Now let's see what's inside this chest and move on.
If only treasure could staunch the flow of otherworldly corruption.
Nice. A shovel, a ring, and a couple of crests. And if these markings are anything to go by, I'm guessing that the ring comes from the same land as the samurai. So I will give this to him to use as he sees fit. Now let's move on. Raman, lead the way.
The door creaked heavily as it was opened anew, revealing the remains of a once proud cathedral. Even the cold stone seems bent on preventing passage.
Looks like we found an obstacle that we have to clear out by hand or by using a tool. And while I am morbidly curious to find out what will happen if we use our bare hands, I think I'll go with the shovel on this one. I said I'll use the shovel on this... Come on, what's wrong with this thing? Oh, there we are. I really have to hand it to Red Hook. They really know how to mess with your head. For a second there, I thought my mouse was broken, which should be impossible because I bought it last week. But that's not important. What is important is that we get rid of the switch as soon as possible.
Unnerved, unbalanced.
That pulling ability of hers could be a problem in the long run. And not only can it shuffle my party, but it can also stress us out. So the sooner we get rid of her, the better. Time is of the essence, so we cannot afford to be gentle. So Master Samurai, will you do us the honor of piercing this woman with your longsword? No blood. This must not be her first time. The moment those words were uttered, the skeletons went into a frenzy. And one thought went through everyone's head. Was this the work of the Church of Social Justice? A church so violent and irrational that its own members fought each other over the simplest of disputes. But when they united under a common banner, nothing was safe. Inspector Fromman's stomach churned with disgust when the bounty hunter pulled the witch closer to him. But he didn't hesitate, and his halberd cracked the witch's skull open.
As the fiend falls, a faint hope blossoms.
Now the only thing left were the skeletons, and Guts stepped forward. His crossbow was bolted and ready to fire. The only thing he had to do was aim and pull the trigger.
A devastating blow.
The arrows struck their targets, and one of the skeletons fell. And the party's morale went up. With renewed vigor, they struck the last skeleton down. This is kind of exhausting. And we barely began exploring. But after the crossroads, it should be easier.
Press this advantage. Give them no quarter.
With victory and loot in hand, the party pushed on. The door opened, and they entered the next chamber, which was thankfully empty, so the narrator had some time to refresh himself. But one question remained. Which way do we go? Since there were no indication as to which route was safer, the team decided to flip a coin. Heads, they go north. If it was tails, they would go east. The coin landed, and they went north. With their torches relit, they boldly stepped into the hallway, and continued to march on, until they stumbled upon the belongings of a long-gone adventurer.
Finding the stuff is only the first test. Now it must be carried home.
Encouraged by this discovery, they pressed on, and went even deeper into the ruins. And like the masters of the house, they barged into the next chamber. Much to the surprise of the unsuspecting cultists. Without much hesitation, the bounty hunter threw his hook and struck the witch. But the witch simply staggered backwards, for the hook just bounced off the witch's stomach and onto the floor. The sound of metal hitting stone echoed across the room, while the dim light of the torch revealed a small dent in the witch's leathery belt. Armed with that knowledge, the inspector took a step forward. And with a mighty battle yell, he managed to stun one of the cultists and a nearby skeleton. As if on cue, Guts raised his arm and crossbow, and fired. His arrows struck both the skeleton and the witch, but they didn't slay them, so the samurai rushed in to finish them off. But due to a language barrier, there was a horrible misunderstanding. And while the samurai returned to his fold, the bounty hunter and Guts struggled with Inspector Fromman, who decided this was the perfect opportunity to express his love for the foreign people through the ritual of hugging their necks with his bare hands and lifting them upwards. Several foreign words were also used in this ritual, but the samurai didn't understand any of it. However, he did learn several hand signals. Unfortunately, the lesson was cut short by a dark cloud that hit the good inspector. As the party turned, they heard the angry shouts of the cultists, and tried to avoid another cloud spewed by the witch. But they reacted too late, and the inspector got hit again. The bounty hunter grabbed the torch and reached for his pocket. The enemy might have been out of reach for his axe, but not out of the reach of his flashbangs. With a calculated throw, the bomb flew through the air and hit its target. releasing its content across the witch's eyes. The witch yelled out in pain as she ran across the battlefield, prompting her guardian to lash out in vicious fury.
You will burn! You will burn like this church of intolerance!
The witch screamed as the brawler's claws dug into flesh. And at this point, I ran out of ideas for the story. So we will digress for a bit to explain why am I not finishing these guys off quickly. As you can see, we don't know what the enemy is capable of unless we fight them. So I want to prolong this fight as much as I can to learn all of their skills. And to get rid of the tutorial tips. To be honest, I think we learned everything we can about the witch and the skeleton so we can get rid of them. And they stress guts. Not that he needs it, but the witch can stress us out very quickly, so it's better to get rid of her as soon as possible. On second thought, it might be best if we speed up this mission a bit. It might not seem like much to you, but to me personally, this is something special. Ever since I started working on YouTube, well, working is a strong word, but let's go with that for now. Ever since I started making videos, my life turned for the better. I learned how to talk with confidence, socialize, edit video and audio files, communication with other people, and most importantly, it helped me make friends. Which sounds cheesy, but in my case it's true. I'm very antisocial. That and I got bullied and beaten up as a kid a lot, so I have issues. But that's not the point. This video is dedicated to all of you. Thank you very much for watching and supporting my channel. I hope you will continue to do so in the future. Now let's continue the story. With their pockets filled and the enemy slain, our heroes analyzed their surroundings. Their search quickly revealed a series of markings on a nearby wall. Markings that led towards south, towards treasure, and danger. The markings also indicated several traps, but what kind, they couldn't decipher. So they returned to the hallway that led them into the room. If there were any traps in the area, they could handle them without the fear of an ambush. Their eyes scanned the room, searching for tripwires, pressure plates, anything that could lead to their unexpected death. And finally, they spotted it. An uncovered vent of spikes, just waiting to spring up, and pierce the unfortunate soul that steps on them. The men thanked their lucky stars for avoiding this trap when they entered the hallway, but when they attempted to disarm it, Lady Luck laughed at them, and the bounty hunter's curses filled the hallway as a spike pierced through a crack in his armor and into his side. Inspector Fromman took out a flask of yellow ointment and offered it to the bounty hunter, but he refused it. Instead, he passed the yellow ointment to the samurai, whose injuries were far more grave than his. Bloodied and bruised, but not beaten, the man marched on. And soon they discovered another adventurous sack.
Packs laden with loot are often low on supplies,
whose content left them baffled. Who else but a madman would carry blood in his sack? Upon closer inspection, the men realized this was no ordinary flask, for it was decorated with engraved silver, a material only a select few could afford. Since no men of science or medicine came to their mind as they observed the flask, they continued to search the sack, and soon they discovered another flask, only this time filled with water, and sealed off by the symbol of the Holy Church. Why were these items together? What were they used for? And who collected them? The investigator wondered as he led his men into the next chamber, only to discover another band of skeletons. Without a moment to lose, the men struck. In an attempt to thwart his aim, the bounty hunter lit another flashbang and threw it towards the skeleton arbalist. The bomb landed and exploded, sending the arbalist right into the waiting spear of Inspector Fromman. But instead of piercing the unholy creature, the inspector pushed it towards his unholy companion, stopping them both in their tracks. The samurai followed the inspector's example and struck the arbalist. His blade cut the creature's armor in half, leaving its body exposed for the black swordsman to finish. The black swordsman rushed in to finish the creature, but the brand on his neck began to burn like hellfire. Guts fell on his knees, trying to fight the pain, but it was a slow process. and when he finally rose back to his feet, the skeletons were already marching towards him. One of them came running with his blade swinging. It cut deep into Guts' forearm, but the black swordsman didn't flinch. Instead, he brought his greatsword down and smashed through his opponent's shoulder, ripping his arm right off. The bounty hunter threw another flashbang towards the skeletons, but the fuse went out mid-flight, and the bomb simply bounced off the skeleton's head. So did the samurai's blade as he attempted to follow up the bounty hunter's attack. The skeleton took a step back and swung, trying to catch the samurai off balance. But the samurai was a well-trained warrior and he dodged it with ease. As the fight continued, the skeletons became more aggressive. One of them rushed towards Guts, trying to pierce him with his arbalist, only to get crushed under the weight of his sword. Without a moment to lose, Guts pointed his bell hand towards the enemy. The iron fist dropped, revealing a powerful hand cannon that obliterated one of the skeletons. And with a quick stab with a spear, Inspector Framan took care of the last remaining skeleton.
Trick of the light?
With the enemy slain and their loot out for the taking, our heroes discovered one tiny problem. Their backpacks were full and they couldn't carry everything. They had to make a choice. What should they keep and what should they throw? Since they only had one torch left, it wasn't a hard choice. With the torch relit and their pockets full, the men examined the nearby fountain. The water seemed clear, and the statue of the maiden above it instilled peace among them. But something felt amiss. How could anything remain pure and untouched surrounded by the horrors that dwelt within the ruins? The inspector didn't wish to take any risk, so he took out the flask of holy water and sprayed its content across the fountain. The statue glowed brightly for a moment, and 4 golden feathers fell from the sky.
For a task well performed.
The feathers slowly flew above the men's heads, dispersing into dust upon contact, which reinvigorated their spirits and gave them the confidence to move on. With their spirits high, the men marched on as the torch's light slowly faded. With every passing step, the air grew fresher and colder, and they knew that their expedition was coming to an end. As they approached the door for the next room, the bounty hunter stopped them. Without a word, he sent the stone rolling down the hallway, springing the trap waiting for them. With that obstacle cleared, the men marched carefully, and soon they reached the door for the next chamber. As they entered, a gust of fresh wind blew in their faces, cooling off the sweat on their brows and revealing an exit in the form of a collapsed wall. And even though the inspector was opposed to the idea of leaving without evidence, the lack of torches, inventory space, and physical and mental strain on his men convinced him it was time to end their mission. At least for now. With renewed vigor, the men marched on and returned to the hamlet, where they were welcomed as heroes, and their findings were put to good use by the local merchants and craftsmen. And I believe this is the perfect place to end this episode. Thank you very much for watching. My name has been Bedomy, and if you would like to see your character featured in this series, let me know in the comments. Thank you for all the support you've given me so far, and I hope you will continue to do so in the future. Until next time, my name has been Bedomy, and good night.